We want Democrats to be traumatically affected. We want, when they wake up in the morning, we want them to not want to go to work because they are increasingly viewed as the villains. We want their funding to be shut down so that the EPA can't do all of the rules against our energy industry because they have no bandwidth financially to do so. We want to put them in trauma.
That was Project 2025 architect Russell Vought speaking to a conservative group in 2023, explaining what a second Trump administration would mean for unelected federal workers. Vought currently serves now as the director of the Office of Management and Budget in the Trump administration, which has been involved in the downsizing of the federal government. The new book, The Project, How Project 2025 is Reshaping America. Author and staff writer at The Atlantic, David A. Graham.
You know, I'm so glad our crack staff actually got that quote, because I think it's one of the most important quotes to understand when all the chaos was unfolding the first month. People said, what's happening? It was all according to plan, even traumatizing federal workers, as Russell Vought says there. That was, I think, in 2023.
Right.
He said, we want to traumatize them so much that they don't want to go to work.
Right. It looks like chaos to us, but it's totally planned. It's the way they've laid it out. And I think the way, hear him talk, he sounds so mild-mannered and he's saying these really radical things. And I think that's true of a lot of Project 2025, which sounds very technocratic and bland and is, in fact, a really radical plan to remake American society.
And talk about what's at the heart of that.
There's a connection to that older conservatism,
right.
But I think this is another step beyond. I mean, it's a willingness to, first of all, it's trying to accrue a lot of executive power, which is, traditionally not something that conservatives have liked,
not
of
at
course.
all.
And it's about using the coercive power of the government to affect people's lives, I think, in a way that other conservatives have resisted for a long time.
And one of the things I think is important about David's book is that those of us that have opposed this administration, whether it's the left or civil rights people or whatever, don't understand they have a plan. And your strategy has to address their plan, because you could inadvertently help their plan by adding to the trauma and the drama and doing things that feed right into the image they want to counter you. Talk about how methodical their plan is, and you have to have a methodical counter plan if you're going to win this.
That's right. I mean, it's amazing for them to lay this out. They put this on the internet 18 months before the election, and people kind of ignored it. We talked about it a little during the election last year, but I think people just didn't really understand how sweeping it was. And when I sat down to read the whole thing, even having read bits and pieces a lot, I was shocked at just how radical it was and how sweeping it was.
Let's be more specific about how some of that document has now been translated into policy in the country. What have we seen in these first couple of months?
Well, I think so much of what we've seen, whether it's the executive orders on day one and on day two, and since then, those are straight from a playbook they put out. You look at the layoffs of federal workers. You see attempts to close the Education Department. It's just point by point right from here. And I think the thing that gets missed is people talk about the policies, but it's so much a scheme for how to rework the entire shape of government. And that's something that I think maybe didn't come through during the campaign.
So, David, tell us what's still to come, because I know you recently wrote about how you feel like what Project 2025's next focus, the administration's next focus, might be actually on the family. Explain that.
Yeah, I think the focus on the family is maybe the most important thing for a lot of the authors. They care very deeply about this. They want a very traditional Christian family, biblically based vision, fathers working, mothers raising children. Obviously, anti-abortion policy is a big part of this. And because this is so deeply held, it sort of suffuses the whole project. I think this is something we haven't seen a lot so far, but it's going to be very important in the months and years to come.
How do you implement that through, because again, this is the sort of thing that conservatives, small government conservatives would say, stay out of our homes.
That's
we'll
right.
Take care of ourselves.
Through every part of the government. So that's the Department of Health and Human Services. That's using the Department of Labor to track statistics. It's using, you name it. Every department becomes part of the scheme.
David, let me ask you really quickly. Do you think the administration and maybe Russell Vought and other people are surprised at something that I will say didn't surprise me at all? The pushback. Washington always wins. Like, Do you think they're surprised at the pushback that they've gotten from all angles?
Yeah. I think Russell Vought was prepared for this. You know, he's such an insider. He spent so much time in government.
He knew this was going to happen.
He knew this was going to come, and that's why he wanted to move so quickly. That's why he wanted to be ready on day one.
What about Elon Musk?
As far as they can.
What about Elon Musk? You think Elon Musk might be a little surprised right now by what he's faced and how he's lost half of his fortune? Maybe. I don't know the exact numbers, so.
I think he is surprised because he clearly doesn't understand how Washington works. And, you know, Vought is happy to use him as a vessel, get that as far as he can, and then he'll move on to the next thing.
Donald Trump denied any connection to the controversial Project 2025. It was assembled by the Heritage Foundation. Project 2025 outlined a sweeping conservative policy agenda on a wide variety of topics, including everything from curtailing abortion rights to firing civil servants. But since now President Trump took office, several people affiliated with the nearly 1,000-page document have actually taken roles in his administration, and many of the goals it outlined have been set in motion. We're now 3 months into the second Trump administration. Can you give our viewers some very specific examples of policies you say stem specifically from Project 2025 as it was outlined before the election?
Right. So we've seen, you know, layoffs of civil servants. That's very much in Project 2025. We've seen things like closing the border, using student visas to crack down. That's straight from Project 2025. Really, many of the executive orders we saw in the first day of the administration, that's right from Project 2025.
Your book quotes a Bloomberg government analysis that found that 37 out of 47 of the executive orders that came out in the first few days of the presidency came from Project 2025. Why then did the president deny so vehemently that he had nothing to do with Project 2025, that he hadn't even read it, that he thought the ideas were ridiculous?
You know, the president's so closely tied with so many of these people. So he may not have read Project 2025, but these are people who were in his first administration, they're in his second administration. They are, you know, they're driving things forward, and they wanted to be prepared with staff who could help him enact his agenda on day one, which is how they've been able to move so quickly. But I think people talked about it as kind of just a wish list of policies and kind of, you know, demagogued that a little bit. But it's much more sweeping. You know, it is a whole program to reshape American society and how people interact with the government, and I think it's important for people to understand that. And something that you see throughout this, that Project 2025 is the sense that the Supreme Court is going to help them out. They want to get test cases to the Supreme Court and overrule these precedents that have been in case sometimes in place for maybe a century to move forward on their plan. They see America as founded as a Christian nation. They think we've come away from that. We've fallen away from that, and they want to get back to that. They want a nation with traditional families, a father who works, a mother who raises children, very traditional gender roles, and they think the way to do that is to have this vast accrual of power, change the way the federal government interacts with people, and then really change everyday life. You know, this isn't just about politics. This is about what we have in our classrooms, in our homes, and in our lives.
I proudly created the White House Faith Office and a brand new DOJ task force to eradicate anti-Christian bias. And there is anti-Christian. You don't hear about that very much, but there is anti-Christian bias. We're stopping the radical indoctrination in our schools and supporting school choice. And we're going to be moving our education department and various educational departments down to the states where they belong.